We have the little catch box, throw a box around to ask questions. I'll lead off with the first question someone asked earlier. As CWNEs, and we try to mix up which CWNEs are up here every year. Last year we had a bunch of old guys. Where's Rick Murphy?
Am I supposed to wear this mic?
And me, and old guys. Been around a long. So I wanted to get some new blood, some CWNEs who are fairly new minted, not just this year, but within the last little bit. First question, and you have a microphone? You can just leave the base there and just kind of move the wired part. Thank you. First question is, in your implementations to your customers, and some of you work for VARs, some of you don't, and you work for companies, whoever you work for, implementations on recommendations for how do guests access? What do you recommend? Go ahead.
As far as guest access goes, I'm a big fan of let them on, restrict what you have to. If you have had issues,
down, please.
If you have had issues with BitTorrent, if you have limited connectivity, restrict Netflix, things like that. But I'm all for open guest, where captive portals are kind of evil because they make it a lot harder for people. A lot of devices will auto-connect and just sit there, and people don't get email for hours because they don't realize it's connected and not having an actual connection to the internet. So I like to keep it as open as possible. That's pretty much where I say.
Anyone else?
I'll go. I'm kind of along the lines, it's like, don't block it if you don't need to. Making it painful for people, they don't want to use it, and if they don't want to use it, what's the point? I'm a little more flexible on the captive portal. Certain situations, it's a requirement for the customer, or they want it. The goal should always be to make it as frictionless as possible. If you have to do it well. For me, guest is more about how do I plumb it, how do I protect my environment from it. So network and firewall and IP address space and internet connections become a much bigger part of that than just the SSID and the captive portal.
Yeah, I mean,
Do you have a lot of guests in the mine?
What's that?
Do you have a lot of guests in the mine?
No, and actually that's kind of the point I'm going to make, is that I agree both with Jake and Ryan quite a bit. Open frictionless access is kind of important, but I deal more with just trying to educate clients still that guest access is different than access for your employees. It's still surprising how many times I go into a place and say, you know what, your guests shouldn't be on the same VLAN as your internal, clients. And educating on how simple it is to just fire up another VLAN or anchor, clients into, a DMZ. And it's amazing how clients go, if I knew it was that simple, I would have done it a long time ago. So some of it's really just a lot of basics, and maybe that's just because, we've only got 1 million people in the whole province, so it's not like there are a lot of Wi-Fi experts around.
James?
I was just... I'm not a huge fan of captive portal either. It's onboarding is difficult. There are some vendors out there with PPSK and similar technologies. I would even, it's hard to manage, but even like a EPEEP with temporary based users for guests, you're still protecting the PMK and providing guest access through RBAC.
Okay, my take is really simple. Fast, free, frictionless.
So that's F.
It's kind of like the broadcast domain, FFFFF. Actually, I had a guy in class once who said, "You have the same problem we have all at my campus. There's FOOF everywhere." It was a Wireshark class, and he saw FOOF all over his network. Anybody? Other questions?
To piggyback on that, what are we seeing in the industry for leaving it open and dealing with the legal departments and their EULA rights and their their fear of somebody being on the guest network and doing inappropriate?
I will defer to a company who has more lawyers than most companies have employees. I know to any Disney property, every Disney property has no captive portal, no EULA, and they've figured it out. There are many companies who have done that. I think it takes a little gutsy move from a lawyer because there's no case law, and lawyers like to refer to case law. And
Are we seeing capability of propagating that to other customers? That's the real question. We've seen it at a lot of large hospitals. We've seen it a lot
We need it here to be on the recording.
for the recording, we need it on the mic.
You're right. We've seen it in a lot of large hospitals. We've seen a lot of entertainment areas that are doing it. But then when you deal with another customer, they're like, oh, we can't do it because it's not legal. How do we start to propagate that out? That's the real question.
You guys have an answer? I don't have an answer. It's one lawyer at a time because they are so risk averse. They don't, since there's no case law, they don't want to be the first to try it. So maybe we need to get with the
I think
legal
that just,
association and see if they can.
that just goes into educating the customer. A lot of them say it's a legal requirement for my industry and for HIPAA, PCI, things like that. If we're tunneling it to a DMZ, is that actually a requirement anymore because it's not touching any of that network? There is
Sometimes it's not even on your network. You just have an entirely separate provider.
And it's not, there is no precedent set. People say it's a legal requirement, but where is the precedent set that this company was sued because of
That's the
guest
lack
access?
of case law, and thus lawyers
Yeah.
won't go along. So I don't know if we have an answer, but if anyone does, let's share it
So
because we need it.
I'll talk a couple things. So first, if you're doing very minimal stuff to your guests, the need for a EULA really goes down. If you're getting in and SSL decrypting and inspecting traffic and doing things that might be both intrusive and could have privacy ramifications, maybe you should tell them that you're doing it. I don't think you should do those things, but if you are, then maybe you should be informing them of what you're actually doing. The other piece is that I had a customer that had a configuration accident, and they turned the captive portal off. And part of that was leverage. I don't know, but I suspect part of it was leverage to show people what it could be without the captive portal. And surprisingly enough, 6 months later, that captive portal was gone. Even though the lawyers were the ones that said, hey, we have to have this, everyone said, why are things so great now and they weren't a couple weeks ago? And that was the driving factor for them internally that, hey, we can take this off.
I like that idea. I wonder if I can.
Not condoning that.
Got another question here?
Another question?
Yeah, it's kind of to piggyback on what you were saying. I'm with the higher ed, and we use a captive portal. We only collect phone number if they want the credentials texted to them, and email address, and then they can put in their name. That's a free-form box. But it's considered our form of due diligence. We have several past presidents on our campus, and it happened a number of years ago. Somebody issued a threat against the president. Within 20 minutes, Secret Service is knocking on your door, says, show me your logs, who did this? We have to be able to hand them a valid phone number, valid email address, and say, we've done our due diligence now. What you do with that's up to you. But that we restrict them. They go on a different VLAN, different IP space, so they do not have, or they have very limited access into the campus, but they have full access to the world from the standpoint of we used to lock it down, but then you have somebody with XYZ VPN client that wants a different port or something. We said, what are we really trying to do? We're trying to protect the campus. So here's a good balance, and that works for us.
Yeah, so it sounds like you made the decision, you didn't care about your customers, you cared about the campus. That is totally a fine decision. So nothing wrong with that. Next question.
Got one right here.
To keep going in that direction, and Brennan, you might know what I'm talking about. In Canada, the copyrights law have you keep that kind of information that gentleman was talking about because you can get sued. There are several ISPs that got sued because they couldn't identify. So that's why we still keep our captive portal.
It's also kind of is a MAC address an identifier any different than someone's phone number? So, okay, a non-captive portal question. Thank you, Manon.
Any tips to not hate yourself after full day walking surveys?
How to not hate yourself?
Your feet, your back, your
Whiskey.
Doing full.
Whiskey.
I got it. Buy a Segway.
Good intern.
Get a good intern. That's a good answer. I like that. My Segway had an ROI of 7 days. So any manager who says, I'm not going to buy you a Segway because you see, no, it has a huge ROI. You go 2 to 3 times faster and more stable and cleaner. So that's my answer. Second to that, not quite as cool, is get one of those little old man little scooters, and you can scoot around. You look dorky, but at the end of the day, you still can get up and go play a game of racquetball. The walking part, any of you guys?
Invest in good shoes. If that's what you do for a living, just like nurses that are on their feet all day, buy a good pair of shoes, change them when they're worn out, right? Don't do that. The other piece is I ran into it where I would have fatigue of certain places in my body. So like my lower back would, at the end of a day of surveying, and I found that changing up how I survey kind of alleviated that. So day one, I'm holding my laptop. And if you guys, most of you have made fun of my giant laptop, but at the end of the first day, my arms are kind of tired. Second day, I'm wearing like a survey tray or a lap desk or whatever you want to call it, and that moves it to my lower back. And so throughout the week, I'm changing up how I'm holding my laptop, how I'm carrying it, what part of my body I'm loading with that weight, so that by the end of the week, your lower back's not wrecked, your arms aren't wrecked, that kind of stuff.
Anyone else? Hey, next question.
Hey guys, I just wanted to ask, what has been the biggest change since you've obtained the CWNE? What has it enabled you to do? What's different now that you have your CWNE credentials?
Brennan?
To be really honest, nothing.
Get to sit up here.
And that's not a negative comment on the program. And I'll say, I guess, we had some of the discussions recently about certifications, including I renewed my CCIE, and there was a troll. And I'll tell everybody, I did my CWNE for me. So that's it. I've been doing this for a long time, and for the first decade of my career, I said, one of these days, I gotta get off my butt and actually learn about the stuff, the real nuts and bolts about Wi-Fi, because I'm kind of, I'm doing stuff I've seen before, then it's good. I'm looking up the manuals, but I don't have the skills really to understand what's happening. So, when I finished my IE, I kind of said, this is the time that I'm going to do this. And so it's for me, it makes me better at my job, but, it's not like I'm charging a higher rate because I have my CWNE anymore, right?
I know that, so getting the CWNE didn't change anything about my job or my skills. The road to the CWNE was by far, it changed the way I engineered everything. Specifically the CWAP. That alone right there probably had the biggest impact on my career. Just the understanding that you gain studying and being able to sit that test successfully is priceless. It makes you understand everything that's going on, from design to security to just how it all works. It helps a lot. So it wasn't the CWNE that did it, it was all the steps getting there that did.
Yeah, similar. I think for me, the answer is perspective, and likewise the road too. For me, I enjoy the CWSP and CWAP the very most. I consider myself a protocol person, and I still do labs pretty much every week like many of you, because I want to learn more about the protocol and how what's supposed to be there. Like Peter always talks about, recognize what's supposed to be there so that when it's not there, then you know. And so just kind of building upon that snowball of knowledge for me. I think that's...
I kind of concur. It didn't really change. The CWNE part didn't change, but the CWNP program definitely gave me more perspective. I did my CCIE first, and I learned certain things, and the CWNP program just kind of filled in a lot of the gaps that I assumed and now actually know the details of. So.
And do you have another question? You're just holding. Okay, go ahead.
I do. I'm just.
You're doing the very good Vanna thing too.
It's natural. Following through with that CWNE, roads to CWNE, how did you guys, I mean, there's a lot of people that are actually studying different exams here, and, you know, we all have our ways of studying, but what is your, like, top 2 tips? Personally, I'm a big fan of how Blake puts it, try to take all the exam objectives, and you should, when you're really ready, you should be able to speak about every one of them in your own words and explain them. Now, how do you go about studying? How do you go about labbing and everything?
So I had a math professor who told me, he was telling me why I wasn't doing well in math, and he said, I saw it, I forgot it, I heard it, I remembered, and I did it, and I understood. And I think the CWNP program is about building understanding. Some people can read the book and understand it. Some people can listen to a lecture and retain it. But I don't think we really truly build that understanding until we get in and start doing it. And ultimately, the knowledge in the CWNP program is worthless until you turn it into understanding and be able to apply it. And so for me, it was read the book, listen to what I can, read what I can, and then get your butt in the lab and see it happen in the packets and be able to take that, break it, look at it again, fix it, go back and figure out what changed. And that way you really truly understand the bits you need to know to do your job.
Yeah, I was fortunate in my career to move into the VAR space, where I get on a different network every week, a different environment, and I'm able to see why problems occur that are common across all environments, that are specific to different types of environments, to see the different design styles and actually do them and implement them. Prior to that, when I was in the enterprise and EDU space, it was a lot trickier because I was on the same exact network and I couldn't tinker. I wasn't configuring and troubleshooting all the same stuff all the time. I will say I was invited by Keith at that point to go out because he was doing a survey at a stadium nearby where I lived, and I just got to tag along and see. And I know that, you know, Wi-Fi is a small community. There are a lot of people willing to do stuff like that. If you are part of the community and you're open and willing to learn from other people, there are a lot of people that'll let you tag along if you want to see how a stadium or a large enterprise or a university are done. People like to talk about their networks, especially with people that want to see how it's working and want to learn from it. So if you don't have that opportunity in your day-to-day, find someone that's willing to share theirs with you so you can get a different perspective.
I know anyone who does surveys would love to have a minion. You could get lots of survey practice in. For free, of course, but yeah.
Do we get to drive on your Segway?
Of course, if you'd like, yeah. I've had 100 plus people drive the Segway, so. Up front? You want to see if you can get all the way to the front?
Oh, I had a question.
Oh, you had a question, and then up front, okay.
Speaking on the CWNE, how did you guys go about your application process? It's always interesting to hear how you guys, because I've heard so many different ways, and as somebody...
Did you say the application process?
The application process.
Oh, one, you can go back to WLPC Budapest. Where? Oh, Martin gave a presentation on how to prepare for the application. You can go through that. The other is if you contact any other CWNE, having for 5 years been on the board review until just January, reviewing every application, I can tell you if you have a CWNE who we know is a CWNE who is active and they're the ones who are endorsing you, it helps a whole ton. If you just have your mother and your daughter and your boss who loves you, who wants you to get the CWNE, it makes it much more difficult for us to evaluate, especially when you don't write very well. So the applications, I wasn't saying you don't write very well. Writing isn't that big of a deal. What we want to see in the writing is, do you know what you're talking about? And I can tell you some people have cut and paste from Cisco documents, and on those documents, the people who wrote them happen to be on the board. Your chances of getting passed when you plagiarize from someone and we don't want to hear marketing, we want to hear how it affected you. And so think from your standpoint, your customers, and you'll be fine. Todd.
So I agree the community here is very giving, and I really appreciate that. I really liked what Ryan said about if you have an opportunity to tag along with someone, it's a great learning experience. I wonder though, is there a way are people open to flipping that around? I mean, I would love to bring a veteran, a CWNE with me on one of my surveys so they can see how the processes that I'm going through and seeing if they're right, or they can then directly tell me, hey, what about this? You're missing this step.
I know a ton of them. If you just pay their $2,000 a day fee, they'll come and do anything. I mean, that's when you're asking, you're saying, does someone who bills out, you want to take their billable hours away? They're willing to help, and if you can help them, offset it, but taking billable hours from freelancers. Sure. Now, if there's a lot of CWNEs who work full-time for someplace, and they might want to try something else. So, yeah, just ask. Renee, there's one in the back. But was that your question? Yeah. Would it help to have some like a mentor swap board where you can go and say, I want to learn, and somebody else says, I can? Yeah. We'll work on that.
I was just going to offer a suggestion about the mentorship or the feedback sort of thing, and the senior to the I guess the beginning. Instead of maybe having the CWNE come in person, maybe if you blogged about maybe a particular survey you did or a job you did, installation, and put it out there for feedback, and even directed it to the CWNEs, maybe it'd be a bit more, they'd be a bit more inclined to give you feedback rather than tromping around while you're doing a survey, because I see that already when I put out tweets about things that I've done. I get feedback from guys who've done it already. So
the community is wonderful that way. I don't think any of us who are CWNEs, if you ask a question and it only took us 15-20 minutes worth of research or answer it, we'd easily do that. If it's a couple hours and you want us to evaluate your entire project, it better include an Amazon gift card. Just saying. Other questions?
Are there any other resources aside from Twitter to get knowledge from?
No. Sorry to jump on that. I think there's two sources. Twitter is the instantaneous, fast 140 characters. The other side are blogs. How many people in here have a blog? That's a lot of information that's floating around out there. And if you don't have a blog, all you have to do is have a blog. They're not that hard. They're free. And how many people, here's just a question. Those of you who have had a blog, have you ever Googled and your own blog came up? You were looking for an answer and you already have the answer, you just forgot it because it happens all the time. On Tech Field Day, 100% of the people who blog have Googled to get an answer and their own blog came up. And you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Think of the blog as a repository for your own knowledge and your own training. Don't feel just because someone wrote a good blog, Francois wrote a great blog, how many times have you had to look in your own? Every day. It's a resource for others. So between those two, it's there. Personally, I'm not a fan of LinkedIn because I don't want to look for a job. But there are people who use LinkedIn for the same purpose. There's a CWNP forum. Just raise your hand. How many people actively hit CWNP forum? What would make you do it more, Jake? Raised your hand.
Oh, sorry.
There's not a lot of active people on the CWNP forum, so that's part of the challenge. Is that it's typically pretty. I would say it's fairly focused towards the exams. It's not quite as, I'd say, real life focused. And I'll be honest, now that I'm done with the exams, I'm not really interested in what's on them. Not that I'm not interested, but I'm not trying to pursue. It's less, right? But it's the knowledge is good, but I'm not hitting it near as frequently because I'm not moving towards the CWNP stuff.
Eddie Ferrero, hey Eddie, in his absence, he does the question of the day. It is on Twitter, but I find that there's a lot of engagement in that. So by the time
that's Lee Badman. That's Lee Badman's. Yeah.
Sorry, Lee. Where are you? Don't throw anything at me. So Lee has a really great question of the day, and I think I just maybe saw Eddie comment a lot. So sorry about that. But Lee's question of the day is quite valuable, and I find that a lot of people do comment on it, and kind of gets a bit of a forum going.
Yeah, at least it causes a discussion. So, yeah. Well, thank you for your time. We've hit our time limit. Yay! Thank you, CWNEs.